On the 1st of July this year, Canada celebrated its 150th birthday. Now, we told you all about this in a previous video where we also showed you some of the keys as to why Canada is one of the most admired countries in the entire world. Canada, it's divided into 10 provinces and 3 territories that have so many unique regulations that in 2017 they actually had to sign a free trade agreement among them. However, even though this country has turned 150 in perfect shape, Canada is also facing problems. They face social, political, and economic threats that could be considered, well, pretty serious indeed. Because, as you probably already know, well, unfortunately, nothing is perfect. So, in a previous video, whose link I'll leave at the end of this video as well as in the description below, we looked on the bright side of things, and Canada ended up looking pretty darn wonderful. But in this video, we're going to discuss the main problems and threats that are affecting Canada. And, well, the first of them, it's got a lot to do with this 150th anniversary.
A birthday somehow artificial?
Not all Canadians, not even close, celebrated this 150th birthday. We can find several different reasons why, but in order to explain them, we should first tell you about what happened 150 years ago. So let's jump back in time all the way to 1867. On the 1st of July of that year, the territory was still a part of the British Empire, but it was on this day that the first British North America Act was signed.
The British North America Act of 1867 was a law that united the 3 colonial provinces of New Brunswick, New Scotland, and Canada, which was divided up into Ontario and Quebec that very same day into the Confederation of Canada.
On top of these 4 provinces, which still kept quite a lot of autonomy, a federal government was organized to give them some cohesion. And above this government, there were still the British authorities. In fact, to this day, Canada is still a monarchy and Queen Elizabeth II is still the head of state. Also, and although it might sound surprising, Canada didn't have total independence from the UK until very recently, 1982 in fact. That's right, up until 1982, any constitutional modification required the approval of the British Parliament. So, as you can probably see from this, that law in 1867 didn't result in a completely independent country. But, dear viewers, that's not the end of it. There are more reasons why Canadians dislike this day. The most important of these is that when the settlers arrived, Canada, well, it wasn't an empty land.
The First Nations, the Inuits, and the Métis.
Around 1.5 million inhabitants had nothing to celebrate last July, and those inhabitants, well, they were the natives of Canada.
It's a celebration of the worst 150 years of Indigenous people's lives.
But don't think of this as only a historical problem. The recognition and integration of these peoples, it continues to this day to be a national problem. In fact, the government of Justin Trudeau has made it a priority. Consider what the Prime Minister had to say on the 21st of June of this year.
No relationship is more important to Canada than the relationship with the Indigenous peoples. Justin Trudeau.
But now you might be wondering, who are these groups, and what has happened to them over the last 150 years?
According to the Canadian Constitution, there are 3 large groups. The First Nations, made of more than 600 native communities, the Inuits, the people of the Arctic, and the Métis, the result of mixing natives with the new settlers.
So Canada was not an empty land when the settlers arrived. It's actually estimated that there were around 500,000 people from these native communities who signed agreements with the British and the French authorities. They even participated in the battles that protected the independence of Canada.
Canada would be American today if not for the Indian allies who fought for the crown. Peter Russell.
Oh yes, the US really did try to invade Canada more than once. Well, the problem is that despite being the first people in this land, and despite the fact that they participated and contributed to the independence of the country, the natives suffered clear cultural persecution. Yep, as a result of that obsession some have to create homogeneous national identities, Canada went through a period of persecuting the natives. For years, these people suffered the occupation of their territories and were sent away to reservations, which sometimes didn't even have the basic conditions that would allow for their survival. Furthermore, both their language and their cultural and religious rituals were sometimes forbidden. This persecution, it reached such a point that the authorities set up a system of residences and boarding schools for the children of native families. The government took the children from the families and sent them to schools where they would receive an education which was fully Western so that they could lose all aspects of their cultural identity. Tens of thousands of children, they were educated in this way. And these schools, they continued until the 1970s, and the consequences, they still have to be dealt with today. Poverty rates much higher than average, there are many broken families, depression is rampant, and alcoholism and suicide rates are higher than average. These are the consequences of this sort of persecution. Along with these, racism and exclusion were also very normal. So, in 2008, the Prime Minister at the time, Stephen Harper, apologized to these peoples for the atrocities and established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Mr. Speaker, I stand before you today to offer an apology to former students of Indian residential schools. The treatment of children in Indian residential schools is a sad chapter in our history.
They've also paid hundreds of millions of dollars in reparations, but money can't fix all these problems. Even today, Canada is still looking for the best way to move forward from this dark period of its history. But now let's step back forward to the present day and look at the relationship between Canada and the US, or well, more aptly, Canada and President Trump.
The breakup threat.
Canada is very dependent on its relationship with the United States. They are so dependent that we could almost say that the Canadians would be unable to live without their southern neighbor. Indeed, almost 70% of Canadian trade is bound for the United States. Further, the industrial sector of both countries, it's strongly interconnected. So this is a special relationship, and this is something Justin Trudeau knows. Indeed, he said so in his campaign, and as soon as he reached power, he concentrated his international affairs into improving Canada's relationship with the United States. And truth be told, the relationship that he built with Obama, it was great.
So thank you again for your leadership and your friendship. I know that our two countries can achieve great things by working together as allies and as friends, as we have done so many times before.
There's some things we will probably never agree on. Whose beer is better? Who's better at hockey?
But now Trump's in office and is pursuing a policy of protectionism.
Canada, what they've done to our dairy farm workers is a disgrace. It's a disgrace.
And so, what did the Canadian government do? Well, they set up something of a war room. This was an office dedicated to following all the movements of the new administration in Washington. At first, the strategy of Trudeau and his people was buttering up the American government, and it kind of looked like it was working. The Canadian Prime Minister even started a friendship with Ivanka Trump, Trump's daughter.
Justin Trudeau brings Ivanka Trump to Broadway show on Welcoming Outsiders.
As you can imagine, this opened the door to all sorts of wild rumors and speculation. The thing is, they got on well, and both led a seminar on women in business that Donald Trump himself mentioned in a speech to Congress.
With the help of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, we have formed a council with our neighbors in Canada to help ensure that women entrepreneurs have access to the networks, markets, and capital they need to start a business and live out their financial dreams. Donald Trump.
Alright, so this was all great, it seemed to be working really well, but then all of a sudden Trump attacked and accused Canada, rather unexpectedly, of unfair competition, something that he also did with Mexico. It would be really dangerous for Canada to suffer a restriction on trade relations with the US, so the government in Ottawa decided to start the so-called donut strategy, consisting of influencing all institutions around the White House, which would be considered as being in the center, that hole of the donut. But the question, it now becomes, will they achieve their goal? Only time will say. The first challenge is to renegotiate NAFTA, as Trump has demanded. Now, next up, we need to consider another potential crisis that could threaten Canadian prosperity.
The real estate bubble.
The prices in Canada's housing market, they have absolutely skyrocketed. They've increased 76%, and so have the loans that banks are providing. Indeed, family debt in Canada is now among the highest in the world. Have a look at this chart to see the increase in Canadian real estate prices. And then we've got to consider family debt. So, as you might imagine, this has set off all sorts of economic alarms. Many analysts foresee the popping of the Canadian real estate bubble, along with all the consequences that that would have on its economy. And look, almost 7% of the country's employment belongs to the construction sector, and thanks to this mortgage boom, 3 Canadian banks are now in the top 20 banks worldwide. In fact, the market value of the Royal Bank of Canada is higher than that of any bank in the Eurozone. As everyone knows, the consequences of the real estate bubble bursting would be pretty dire, so doing something about this has become another priority of the Canadian government. The government, it's trying to stimulate other sectors while cooling down the real estate market. Maybe the intention to increase the arrival of immigrants by 50% every year has a lot to do with this. More immigrants means more demand for real estate. But other experts, they disagree with this and state that Canadian banks were not affected by the 2008 crisis and that they are quite a bit more solid than other international banks. And also, the economy in Canada, it's doing quite well and is gaining strength after some pretty mediocre years. Anyway, time will tell, but this is a risk that the government is going to have to look out for. Alright, so now let's move on to the matter of public services.
The waiting lists.
In Canada, health is a public service which is managed and financed by the government, with the citizens' taxes, of course. The system is considered to be one of the best in the world. However, they have recently had to deal with some very serious problems. Most important of all of these problems is the issue of waiting lists. According to the Fraser Institute, the average time to see a specialist is 18 weeks. That's more than 4 months. And the demographic of the aging population and the increase of life expectancy has made it difficult for the system to cope. This has all resulted in tens of thousands of Canadians moving to the US to receive medical attention, and lately it is even popular to take out medical insurance in the United States. Anyway, these are the main challenges and threats to the government of Justin Trudeau. Like we said earlier, not everything can be sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. But you know what? We think that the overall result of the Canadian cocktail, well, we think it looks pretty good. So now it's your turn. What do you think of Canada and their systems? Do let us know in the comments below, and also don't forget to subscribe to our channel for brand new videos every Monday and every Thursday. And also don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. And as always, well, thank you for watching.